Hello guys. Today I'm going to be talking about a large-scale analysis of hundreds of in-memory cache clusters at Twitter by Juncheng Yang, Yao Yue, KV Rashmi. Let's get into it. In-memory caching. In-memory caching has been picked up a lot in the last couple of years. So there are systems like Memcached and Redis, which are used heavily right now. But the effectiveness of and performance of in-memory caching is highly dependent on the type of workload that you're using. And even though this has been widely used in the industry, there are still some significant gaps in understanding. So these gaps are like, the first is a lack of comprehensive studies covering the wide range of use cases in today's production systems. Then there are some trends in in-memory caching usage since the publication of previous works. There are also some aspects of this in-memory caching which have received little attention in the existing studies. One such is the time to live, TTL, attribute, which this paper explored a lot. And the next is the lack of open source in-memory caching traces. So in-memory caching at Twitter. So in 2020, Twitter's real-time serving stack is basically service-oriented with hundreds of services running inside containers in production. The in-memory caching is a managed service, and new clusters are provisioned semi-automatically to be used as a look-aside cache upon request. And all these and one cache cluster, and the cache clusters are considered as a single tenant. In comes Twemcache. Twemcache is Twitter's forked version of an earlier version of Memcache. Twemcache containers are small, homogeneous, and a single host runs many clusters. There are 200 total clusters in a data center. So Twemcache often stores small and variable size objects in the range of a few bytes of tens of to a few bytes to the tens of kilobytes. So Memcache uses on-demand heap memory allocators, but these lead to a problem of external memory fragmentation. So to solve this, Twemcache uses the slab-based memory management system from Memcache. So a memory is allocated as fixed size chunks called slabs, which then default to 1 megabyte. And then each slab is then evenly divided into smaller chunks called as items. And the class of each slab decides the slab size of its item. So slab-based memory management eliminates external memory fragmentation, but you end up with internal memory fragmentation. So eviction in slab-based cache. So Memcache uses, the original Memcache uses an approximate LRU queue per slab class to track and evict the least recently used item. So this works as long as the object size distribution remains static. If it's not static, which is not, so this is not obviously true in reality. So once you hand out memory, then at a certain point you have no memory to be allocated. So this is called as slab calcification. So to avoid this, Memcache uses eviction slab-based eviction policies, which we'll discuss further. So use cases of cache. First is storage. Storage is your typical cache use case where you temporarily store data to facilitate better read times and increase your throughput. Next use case is computations. So as you all know, for certain ML models, you can store the results of cache, and these ML models which can show in Twitter of your suggestions of follows of who you can follow based on your engagement and activity. So these kind of results are stored in computations, and they don't need to be updated very frequently. You can also store some type of query results here. Next cache use is transient data. The transient data is basically a type of data which is only used for a limited amount of time. A very notable example of transient data in Twitter is the rate limiter. Rate limiters are basically a window of time and in that time you can only send so many requests in that frame of time. So let's talk about how these guys generated all the logs. They basically used 1 week's worth of unsampled log from 2 instances of Memcache cluster. they did not sample any logs as they thought that the sampling might create a bias in the further analysis. They had these logs contain 700 billion requests from 306 instances of 153 Memcache clusters, and they all focused on 54 largest caches. So yeah, let's get into the analysis. Miss ratio. So as you can see in the figure, you could see that I'm sure we are all aware of what miss ratio in a cache is. So in the figure on the left side, you can see that it shows the mean miss ratio over a week. The dot represents the miss ratio, and the bars that you can see shows the minimum and the maximum miss ratio. Out of this, 8 of 10 on the 10 Memcache clusters have a miss ratio lower than 5%, and 6 of them have a miss ratio close to or lower than 1%. So along with the miss ratio stability is also very important. Miss ratio stability is defined as the ratio of maximum miss ratio over minimum miss ratio. The figure on the right shows it over a week, and then through the figure we can also learn that for most of the caches the miss ratio is below 1.5. So in miss ratio, low miss ratios and high stability in general illustrate the effectiveness of production caches. However, extremely low miss ratios tend to be less robust, which means that the corresponding backends have to be provisioned with no margins. Next is the request rate. As you can see in the figure at the bottom, blue represents the request rate, and the red line indicates the object access rate. As you can see in this figure, that as the request rate spikes, the number of objects accessed in the same time interval also has a spike. So through this, we can learn that these spikes are triggered by factors other than hotkeys. Next is the type of operation. So more than 35% of all Memcache clusters are write heavy, and more than 20% have a higher write ratio than 50%. So these guys have defined a workload as a write heavy workload. If all the operations that you can see here, barring get operation, get s operation, and delete operation, if all the rest of the operations have a percentage sum of 30% and higher, then that workload is deemed as a work heavy workload, write heavy workload. Next is the popularity distribution. So a very popular assumption is that the cache workloads follow a Zipf-ian distribution. There are two deviations for this. The first is that unpopular objects appear significantly less than expected. And then second deviation is that the most popular objects are less popular than expected. The first deviation can happen when the same objects are always accessed multiple times. And the second deviation happens when the client has an aggressive client-side caching strategy. But since these deviations are rare, we can assume that in-memory caching would follow Zipf-ian distribution. TTL. So TTL stands for time to live. Time to live is set when an object is first created into Memcache and it decides its expiration time. The request attempt. So whenever a request attempts to access an expired object, that expired object will be treated as a miss. So it is very necessary to purge all these expired objects from the cache. So the use cases of time to live is the first is bounding inconsistency. So cache updates are usually best effort, and the failed cache writes were not always retried. So it is possible that some objects are stored in in-memory cache are stale. So you use a TTL to apply a bound to them. The TTLs applied at Twitter are usually over the range of a couple of days. So to avoid this or to circumvent this issue, the developers have imposed a soft TTL, which is basically a shorter amount of time. Beyond that, if your soft TTL is expired, then the object gets refreshed. Next is implicit deletion. Your TTL represents the lifespan. For example, as I talked previously about rate limiters. So rate limiter is basically a time span. With the once that is expired, your rate limitation is over. Also, another example for implicit deletion is a new GDPR regulation where your data, once your time is up, once your TTL is up, the data should be wiped off for the regulation. Next is periodic refresh. As I also mentioned earlier about the ML models that suggest you who to follow based on your activity and engagement. These operations are expensive and should be performed should be performed infrequently, and thus once so this is where time to live can come into use. So yeah, so for the analysis part of this, as you can see on the figure on the left, the figure A, you could see from that more than 25% of the workloads use a mean TTL shorter than 20 minutes, and less than 25% of the workloads have a mean of TTL longer than 2 days. The figure B shows that only 20% of Memcache workloads use a single TTL, while the rest of the majority use more than one TTL. Figure C, the third one, shows that the smallest TTL in each cache varies from tens of seconds to more than half a day. And the figure D, that is the fourth one, shows the CTF of each workload's TTL range. So the next aspect of the analysis is object size. So in the first figure, 10A, where my cursor is right now, shows that around 85% of Memcache clusters have a mean key size smaller than 50 bytes, with a median at 38 bytes. The figure B shows that the mean value size falls in the range from 10 bytes to 10 kilobytes, and 25% of the workloads show value size smaller than 100 bytes, and median is around 230 bytes. The graphs at the bottom, out of this, the A graph and the B graph. In this, you can see that some of the objects have the request rates have a diurnal pattern, wherein they follow the same pattern throughout the day. But this assumption is not always true. So in the figure C and D, you can see that this varies, and these request patterns do not show any specific pattern. So now you study all the properties. So to have a correlation between the properties, you can see that the red line shows the write-heavy workloads, and the blue curve shows the read-heavy workloads. So based on this, you could see we can understand that 50% of the write-heavy workloads have a mean TTL shorter than 10 minutes, while for read-heavy workloads, this is around 15 hours. In this figure, on figure B, it shows that the read-heavy workloads have a mean frequency mostly in the range from 6 to 100, with 75 percentile above 200, and meanwhile the write-heavy workloads have a mean frequency mostly between 1 and 100, with a 75 percentile below 10. So let's get into eviction algorithms. So these four are the candidate algorithms that they use. Object LRU and FIFO is similar to what the basic least recently used and first in first out policy that we have seen. Slab LRU and Slab LRC. LRC stands for least recently created. These are two specifically developed for slab-based memory allocation in Memcache. Next is random slab eviction. Random slab eviction is basically selecting a slab at random and then purging it. It is notable to know that random slab eviction is workload agnostic. And then Memcached LRU is a default LRU policy in Memcached, which uses one LRU queue per slab. So let's talk about the miss ratio. They did simulations based on all of these four algorithms, and then they got results. And these results could be classified into four categories. In the first figure you see, that is the first type of result. It shows that all of these four have a comparable results. In the second figure, that is in the second graph B, we can see that LRU is much better than others. In figure C, we can see that the FIFO policy is performing much better. And then in the fourth figure, in the fourth graph, we see that slab LRU policy has much better results than all the other policies. It is also worth notable to know that when your interval time between requests is stable, we can see that LRU can work better than FIFO. And then for if the interval time is haphazard, then FIFO would work better as FIFO treats each object equally, and LRU tends to favor popular objects more. So based on this analysis, they have provided some takeaways or some direction for future direction for research. First is write heavy caches. They say that there is optimization is needed for write heavy workloads. Because mostly write heavy workloads face challenges of scalability, and we all know write heavy workloads have high tail latency. Next is short TTLs, short time to live. Twitter uses a combination of transient object cache and a background crawler. Transient object cache is basically a separate memory pool to store your transient objects, which are the rate limiters. And the background crawler is having a crawler run in the background which proactively checks and scans objects and purges expired objects. So if you use a combination of these two, you still have a trade-off between wasted space and the additional CPU cycles and memory bandwidth which is consumed for scanning. Next is highly skewed object popularity. So our work shows that the object popularity of in-memory caching can be far more skewed than previously shown, or compared to studies on web proxy workloads and CDN workloads. We suspect this has a lot to do with the nature of Twitter's product, which puts great emphasis on timeliness of its content. Our observation that the workload still follows equalization with large alpha value emphasizes the importance of addressing load imbalance. Object size. For object size, the authors also say that we need to reduce the size of metadata, and Twitter has a very large key sizes, and thus it is showing that we could reduce key sizes to optimize the object size. And next is dynamic object size distribution. So object size, look into an object size dynamics might provide a good proxy to evaluate the relationship between the basic dataset attributes and the behavior in cache, and allowing caching systems to make smarter decisions over time. So yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you guys.